This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here he is, the host of the podcast, AWR Hawkins.
Welcome to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast focused on guns, gun rights, the Second Amendment. You know, we sum these things up here each week under the banner of freedom, and certainly won't quit doing that today. Look, folks, this podcast is coming to you on a huge day. If you haven't voted yet, get out and vote. And remember to gun vote, right? And by that, I mean you vote to protect the Second Amendment. You vote to defend your right to keep and bear arms, my right to keep and bear arms. And the way we have to do that is simple. You vote Democrats out. You vote Democrats out. You volunteer to be the wall. Be the wall that stops the blue wave. And I know a lot of you have already voted. You've reached out to me. I know you have. Matter of fact, talked to a friend of mine today, David in Houston. I know he's already voted. And I'll just say I already know he voted for Cruz. He's told me that. Folks, that's the kind of thing you got to do. If you haven't already voted, get out and vote right now. Right now. Pick up your phone, put the phone in your car, and you can listen to the podcast as you drive to the poll, but got to get it done. Get your friends to vote, your neighbors to vote, your family members to vote. We have to get it done. This has to be November 2016 all over again. Think about it. Think about it. If we emerge from this day holding the House and expanding the pro-gun control of the Senate. Look, folks, I can tell you right now, Tester's down in Montana. He's not down by a lot, but he's down. Rosendale can win in Montana and take that Senate seat for pro-gun causes. If you're in Montana, get out and vote. Folks, McCaskill is down. She's not down by a lot, but she's down in Missouri. If you're in Missouri, get out and vote for Josh Hawley. Get out and vote for him. And take that Senate seat for pro-gun causes. Folks, if you're in North Dakota, Heitkamp is toast. If you show up and vote. Show up and vote, and we're going to gain that seat. Folks, if you live in Arizona, McSally and Sinema are in such a race that McSally can win this thing going away if people will show up and vote. In Tennessee, Blackburn can win that seat. Not only can, but should, if you show up and vote. It's the key to everything. See, everything I've said, I've listed 5 states where we can win, but guess what? We can wake up tomorrow and have lost them all if you don't show up and vote. If people who think like you don't show up and vote. Folks, Trump has been wearing himself out traveling this country. I've been watching. Some of the crowds have been unreal. Some of the crowds remind me of videos of rock festivals we used to watch in the 80s and 90s. People for as far as you can see. The energy is there. And Trump has been trying to get us focused. God bless him, and I mean it. What a great president. I'm so proud of him. So proud of Donald Trump. Folks, it's our time. It's our time to use a little energy. It's our time to show up. It's our time to do what we have to do to be sure Trump maintains the majority he needs in the Senate and that he maintains hold on the House, which we have to do if we want to see pro-gun legislation. We really have to do it. We owe it to Trump. These Democrats, they're so low and so dirty that if they get control of the House, they'll impeach him just to prove they can impeach him. See, we owe it to Trump to not let that happen. I'm being honest with you. We owe it to Trump not to let that happen. Now, folks, that brings me to a point I'm just going to throw out real quick that's a little bit of a side point, but I want to be sure you knew. Impeachment works this way. I've heard a lot of people talk crazy about it, but in the House is like a grand jury. They impeach. In other words, they say, there's enough evidence here that this person should be impeached. Or they say, no, there's not. Now, they can't remove anybody from office. That goes to the Senate, and the Senate has power of removal. They've never removed anybody. So far in American history, by the way, the only two presidents who have been impeached were both of what party? No, say it again. Shout it out. What party? That's right, Democrats. Andrew Johnson, shortly after the Civil War. Andrew Johnson was Abraham Lincoln's successor. And then a guy named Billy Jeff Clinton. You know Billy Jeff? Billy Jeff Clinton was the second president to be impeached, and he too was a Democrat. Folks, you got to vote him out. You've got to vote him out. I'm just telling you, November 2016 was the start, not the finish. It was the start, not the finish. We now have Neil Gorsuch. We now have Brett Kavanaugh, both justices. Folks, we're liable to get another opportunity for another justice in the next 2 years. Trump reelected in 2020, we will certainly watch him nominate 1 to 2 more. This is a watershed moment in American history. It really is. And particularly when it comes to protecting the Second Amendment. Let's get out and vote, folks. Let's get out and vote. Folks, had a lot of great feedback this week. As a matter of fact, one of you guys, I'm not going to call your name in case somebody knows you. One of my friends reached out to me, was going to the poll, and asked me about voting and this and that. And I could be wrong, and that's why I'm not saying names. I believe he's probably voting Republican for the first time in his life. You know why? Second Amendment. Folks, the future opens up. The future is bright. We can actually achieve national reciprocity. We could actually achieve that. Think about it. That your concealed carry permit would be just like a driver's license, good in every state. These are the kinds of things we can accomplish if we expand our majority in the Senate and if we keep control of the House. Unbelievable. Folks, if you live in Georgia, let me get to the news. If you live in Georgia, I don't have to tell you this, I don't think, but I'm going to. Because we covered it at Breitbart. We cover at Breitbart what is pertinent for you. What is pertinent for you to know as far as guns and gun rights and legislation go. Stacey Abrams, the Democrat running for governor out there, she literally said that under her gun control plan, you folks might have to what? Turn your guns in, quote unquote. Now, I'm not joking. She was asked by Jake Tapper about legislation she co-sponsored. I believe it's HB 731 in January of 2016. And he said, look, some of your other co-sponsors said the outcome of this would be people would have to turn in their guns. Stacey Abrams then defended her current push to ban certain categories of guns and said, well, look, she said, and I'm paraphrasing her, she said the outcome is not certain. She said there has to be a conversation. And she gave 3 possibilities that could happen once her gun control is in place. Number 1, current guns could be grandfathered in, which means if you own them, you could keep them, but you could never sell them. You could never transfer them to anybody else. Right? So when you die, those guns go away. Option 2, there could be buybacks. Now, buybacks mean the government pays you what they think is a fair price for your firearms, and you hand them over, and they're gone. We saw that in Australia. Stacey Abrams is pushing an Australian plan is what that means. Folks, she said option 3 or C would be that you just turn your guns in. I'm just going to tell you, I know some Georgians. I really do. My cousin Todd is one of them. He's a good dude. I can tell you one thing. I'd be hard-pressed to name anybody I know in Georgia who's just going to turn their guns in. See, the left lives in a fairyland. I'm guessing that when Stacey Abrams sits down to eat, she sees unicorns and rainbows and little people made of pixie dust who tell her that all of these fantasies are going to come true. It ain't going to happen. Not if you folks in Georgia are like the people I know in Georgia, because the people I know in Georgia love their Second Amendment and they love their freedom. Folks, you got to get out and vote. You got to vote for Kemp. You got to vote for Kemp if for no other reason than to keep Abrams out. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory sense toward Kemp. I'm just saying, folks, your gun rights are at stake in Georgia like never before because you have a candidate running on taking away certain types of guns. She's being open about it. She's not beating around the bush. This is like the Hillary Clinton campaign focused solely in Georgia. She also wants to give you waiting periods for gun purchases. Folks, I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. You know what a waiting period is? Whether it's a 3-day period or a 10-day waiting period, and I believe Abrams wants a 3-day period. No matter what length it is, that is a length of time that a woman being targeted by a stalker, that is a length of time through which she has to hide behind a deadbolt with a baseball bat in her hand, just waiting for the state to give her permission to get her gun for self-defense. See, they try to sell us waiting periods. This is always what the left does. Background checks are to be sure that guns are only in the hands of responsible citizens. You know that. That's the old mantra they've been telling us since 1998. Well, then they push waiting periods, and waiting periods are a cool-off period. Waiting periods are a period of time where people who might be emotionally distraught or angry, they can cool off before they get their firearm. Now, see, in reality, what a waiting period is that's the time period where a single mom who fears assault from her estranged husband, that's the time period that she has to spend in hiding, in fear for her life, because she has no means of defense. The Second Amendment, let me say this again. The Second Amendment is a God-given right. It is a natural right. It is in the Bill of Rights because the government is not to put their grubby paws on it. They are not to meddle with it. They are not to infringe on it. And when the government gets involved and adds delays, what they're doing is they're telling that single mom, they're telling that single woman who is in fear for her life from a stalker or in fear that her dignity is going to be taken by that stalker through assault. They're telling her, well, you can wait 3 days. Folks, that's not right. And I'm going to tell you, if you're a voter in Georgia, that's not how the Republicans look at it. That's not how the Kemp camp looks at it. It's your right. Get the gun, and when the guy comes through your front door with bad intent, guess what's going to happen? Maybe he'll see the flash out of the barrel, maybe he won't, but mom will be safe. Mom will be safe, and they'll put him in a yellow sack, carry him out, put him in a cold room with a toe tag. That's how it goes. Sorry about his luck. The door was locked for a reason. You shouldn't have kicked it in. No pity. No pity at all. But I do celebrate the mother's life and that she's there and her dignity is intact. I'll guarantee it. I celebrate it. Stacey Abrams wants to reverse all this, folks. Wants to reverse all this. And you're thinking, and what else could she want? She wants new controls on semi-automatic firearms, period. She differentiated when she was on the State of the Union, which is a CNN show, and I have to tell you that because probably nobody's ever heard of it, and probably 3 of you watch it. I only watch it because it's part of my job, I'll be honest with you. Otherwise, I would have never seen the show. But anyway, Stacey Abrams made clear in her appearance on that show, or differentiated between AR-15s and semi-automatic weapons in general. Now, this shows her lack of understanding. Because she also tried to say, oh, I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment. I know how to shoot and all this stuff. Well, she doesn't understand much because The most popular type of weapon for self-defense, for concealed carry in particular, let's just go that way, concealed carry, is a semi-automatic firearm. A Glock, a Smith & Wesson, a Sig Sauer, a Kimber, a Taurus, a Ruger, right? A Rock Island Armory, a Springfield Armory, right? Right? You with me? On and on I could go. A Walther. I'm not trying to leave anybody out as far as brands go. Daniel Defense, of course, that's a rifle, but I'll guarantee you, I'd love having AR-15 right by the bed. That's not a problem. So, folks, but when we go to concealed carry, I got a little off track. When we go concealed carry, we're talking mainly semi-automatic firearms. She wants new gun controls on those too. See, what she's done is she just grabbed the catchphrase, semi-automatic. See, what liberals don't understand is this. And with what I'm going to say, I'm going to address something about women. I'm not putting women down, so don't hear it that way, all right? Semi-automatic firearms allow petite people, particularly women, and even small men, they allow them to use a large round that will stop an attack with less recoil. Now, let me explain this. If any of you have ever shot a .44 Magnum handgun, hold up your hand. Right? I see you. I see you. All right. Now, not many women, but that's not because women are not as important as men or women aren't equal to man. It just means that .44 kicks so hard, that's usually a gun that a man will shoot. Now, even when you step down to the .357 Magnum, let me see a show of hands. How many of you? See, I see. Same show of hands, just about. A few more women have shot that. Now, here's the deal. When you move from those revolvers and you take a round similar to a .357 Magnum or a 38 plus P, and you transfer that kind of stopping power to a semi-automatic, what the left doesn't understand is the semi-automatic absorbs part of the recoil. It uses the recoil to cycle itself, to grab the next round and place it in the chamber. And by using that recoil, it takes that percentage of the recoil away. In other words, that percentage is not felt. And that allows a woman who might not be able to shoot a larger round in a revolver where she gets so much recoil, in the semi-automatic, it allows her to shoot it. And shoot it accurately. Or, as I say, a small man to shoot it and shoot it accurately. You see what I'm saying? The semi-automatic is genius. That's my point. It's a genius firearm. Stacey Abrams wants to put new controls on them. She wants to ban AR-15s, period. Take them away. She wants to put new controls on semi-automatic firearms. Look, folks, this just can't happen. You're going to have to get out. And you're going to have to vote. If you're in Georgia, get out and vote. Right? Right on. All right, folks. Listen, President Trump is on this. He was in Georgia, and he held a rally, and he warned people, look, if you let Stacey Abrams win the gubernatorial race, well, your Second Amendment is gone. I don't think it could be put any better than that. I really don't. Now, I only want to build on what he said to go back to how I started. I want to say this. No matter where you live, if you sit home and by so doing allow Democrats to take control of the House, everything is in danger. Everything. And for sure, any pro-gun legislation is DOA. Dead on arrival, right? Don't do that, folks. Whether you're in Georgia, whether you're in Montana, whether you're in Utah, wherever you are, don't sit home. This is a day. Go out and vote. You're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Folks, I'm just going to stay on this election theme a little longer. Bill Nelson, Senator Nelson down in Florida, he's troublesome. And by that I mean, if you value the Second Amendment, then Bill Nelson is not your man. I'll just put it that way. Bill Nelson told Florida lawmakers that school violence won't end. And I should say that if you want to understand it, that the criminal use of guns in schools won't end until AR-15s are banned. Now that's all a paraphrase, but that's what he said in so many words. Now I'll give you his direct quote just so you don't think I'm twisting his words, which I wouldn't do. I don't need to twist his words. He comes right out. He comes right out and says exactly what he means. But he said this: "You are not going to solve the problem until you get the assault rifles off the street." All right. So he told them regarding the criminal use of guns at school, Senator Nelson said, quote, "You are not going to solve the problem until you get the assault rifles off the street." So as I said, what he's telling them is the criminal use of guns at school will not stop until you ban AR-15s and other commonly owned semi-automatic firearms. Now here's a big problem for this. Think about this. It's in your memory, even if you're young, because this happened in the 21st century. What was the biggest, deadliest attack, I should say, at an institute of higher learning in the 21st century? You're throwing them out, I hear you. That's right, whoever said it, Virginia Tech, April 16th, 2007. 32 innocent people were killed in a gun-free zone. I'm going to say that phrase again. 32 innocent people were killed in a gun-free zone. Somebody tell me, please, the weapon or weapons that were used in that attack. Yep, you, back in the back. That's okay, go ahead and say it. That's right. 2 handguns. 2 handguns. So, let's just say that Senator Bill Nelson's gun control was in place and those dastardly AR-15s were banned. Guess what? The biggest attack on an institute of higher learning in the 21st century would have still happened. Do you understand this? And by that I mean, you got to see behind it. You have to see behind it. See, the push, it's not really about the gun control push. It's not really about the words that Nelson uses. It's about the motive behind the push. Banning AR-15s would not stop school shootings. I don't care what Bill Nelson says. But what it would do is open the door for other bans. And that's why they go for AR-15s. That's it. That's the reality behind the facade. And you have to pay attention to that. Now, it's easy to make the AR-15 sound so bad. As a matter of fact, we did a story at Breitbart, CBS News, and Scott Pelley, of whom I'm greatly ashamed because he went to Texas Tech, which is where I went. And I'm greatly ashamed of Scott Kelly. He is a moron first class. A moron. He was on 60 Minutes. He's a host. did a little show where they talked about the AR-15 being the mass shooter's weapon of choice, quote unquote, weapon of choice. Folks, that's 100% wrong. It's not 90% wrong. It's not 80% wrong. It's not kind of wrong. It's wrong. We did a story at Breitbart. The Rockefeller Institute of Government did a study over a 50-year time frame, 1966 to 2016, looking at mass shooters. What did they find? Mass shooters prefer handguns over rifles by a 3-to-1 margin. 3-to-1. Now, here's even worse news for Mr. Pelly. When they talk about rifles, they mean rifles of every kind. Rifles of any kind. So if I narrowed that selection to where it only meant, quote unquote, assault rifles, then the margin would be even greater than 3-to-1. You see what I'm saying? Now, this doesn't matter to Pelly because he's just spewing the leftist talking points. So this doesn't matter. And again, that's why I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that he went to Texas Tech. I'm embarrassed that someone gave him a passing grade. Really am. But so be it. Now, here's what else he did. So on an issue of practicality, on a practical basis, I should say, he has no understanding. He ignores the facts, I should say. He's immune to the facts. And also, just on an empirical basis, I don't think the guy has any firearm experience, and here's why. They embedded a video in their little report, and a video of an AR-15 shooting a ballistic gel block, and you've all seen those. And if you haven't, look up my story on CBS News inaccurately calling the AR-15 a weapon of choice for mass shooters. But they showed the 9mm shooting the gel block. Then they show the AR-15 shooting it. And then they zoom in with their cameras and they say the wound channel from the AR-15 was much wider. Now, what they don't show or talk about is the fact that 9mm went clean through that ballistic gel. I mean, from entry point, from one end to the other, ran right through the middle, came clean out the other end. They don't mention that, right? Now, the AR-15 went in, turned up, and exited about halfway through the ballistic gel, and it did make a big wound. I'm not arguing against that, all right? But here's what they did. See, in order to claim that the AR-15 was the weapon of choice, he only cited 5 mass shootings in the history of our country. Cited 5, all of which conveniently were attacks in which the gunman used an AR-15. In the same way, when trying to prove it empirically, they shot ballistic gel with a 9mm and an AR-15, but nothing else. So what I did is I embedded a video of a 30-06 hitting that ballistic gel. Folks, it was like watching a video of the U.S. bombing Hiroshima during World War II. No joke. It took the ballistic gel apart. It was unbelievable. And here's my point. Scott Pelly is a moron. He doesn't understand. And so many other Democrats don't. The majority of them don't, who are in a position of power. If you're listening to this and you're a Democrat, I'm not saying this about you. I'm talking about Democrats who are in a position of power. The very people who want to pass gun laws, they don't even understand guns. They don't understand that an AR-15 comes nowhere close, and I mean nowhere close, to the kind of force you see from your grandpa's 30-06. If you had an AR-15 side by side with an M1 Garand, which is a semi-automatic 30-06 from World War II, and you fired the same number of rounds at any given target, the 30-06 would completely decimate the target, probably leave it either unrecognizable or non-existent. The AR-15 would make some holes in it and do some different things, but I'm talking the amount of power difference is incomprehensible if you've never seen the comparison side by side with your own eyes. Scott Pelley's a moron. CBS News is wrong. 60 Minutes should be ashamed. The AR-15 is not the mass shooter's weapon of choice. It's just not. All right? But look, these folks are going to demonize it. And among these folks, as I've already said, Senator Bill Nelson. Senator Bill Nelson wants to ban your AR-15s. He wants to ban similar, commonly owned semi-automatic firearms. And he is encouraging Florida lawmakers to take up an assault weapons ban in December. Not only that, he wants to ban private gun sales. What? Name anybody in here. Sorry, it's just us. Don't be nervous. Name an attacker who got his or her gun from a private gun sale. It's okay. Do you know? Just raise your hand. You know why no one raised their hand? Because you can't think of one. Because every attacker in the 21st century that I can recall, and I study them for a living, every attacker in the 21st century, high-profile attacker, acquired his or her guns via a background check. Two exceptions come to mind. One, the Clackamas Town Center shooter in Washington State, and the Sandy Hook attacker in Connecticut. Those two are exceptions. Why? Not because they got their guns privately, but because they stole them. They stole them. Yet you had Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, pushing expanded background checks as a solution to Sandy Hook. How does expanding background checks, how does that stop thievery? It's so silly. These Democrats are so desperate for gun control. So desperate. Folks, you got to show up and vote. If you're in Florida, you got to show up and vote. If you don't, your senator is going to be Bill Nelson for another 6 years, and he's going to be targeting your guns and your Second Amendment rights. If you're in West Virginia, if you don't vote and Senator Joe Manchin wins, he's going to do what he's done every time. As soon as he's sworn back in January, he's going to drop the pro-gun mantra and go back to buddying up with Bloomberg and Barack Obama. Folks, you got to know it. We got to be smarter than that. Get out and vote. You're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement, capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Look, I want to wrap up our time by telling you one more important bit of news from this week and then give you a couple of Second Amendment stories, Second Amendment in action. We had New York Democrats pushing a social media background check this week. And what that means is they want to scour your Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts for anything that they would consider hate speech. And if they find that, then you're not allowed to buy a firearm. They don't want to do it to random people. They don't just want to pick somebody and go through their material. They want to, anytime you want to buy a gun, not only do you go through a background check, but then they want you to go through a social media background check where government officials look through 3 years of your Twitter messages, your Facebook messages, and your Instagram messages. And if they find something that to them is hate speech, then you're not going to buy that firearm. Folks, do I have to say it? The Democrats hate the Second Amendment. They hate freedom. They hate it. Folks, this social media background check it's not only an attack on the Second Amendment, but on the First Amendment. Now, I'm not speaking in defense of things that someone might say against people, whether anti-Semitic like we saw in the Pittsburgh synagogue attack or whatever. I'm not speaking in defense of that. But what I'm saying is, when you put a speech test in place, you got to be careful, because whoever controls the test controls which speech is acceptable and which is not. If there's some guy or woman saying, I can't wait to get a gun so I can go kill A and B, I can't wait to get a gun so I can shoot this elected official or that one, if you hear that, that's a completely different situation. But see, the thing is, that person should be arrested before he or she ever gets to a gun store. And if you pay attention, most of the Democrats' gun control push is just that. It's a result of pursuing and enforcing the laws that are already there. They leave dangerous people among us on purpose. I really believe it, on purpose. And it creates chaos, which leads people who otherwise wouldn't do it, leads them to seek government intervention for safety. That's why we have to be armed to protect ourselves. And that leads me to the mother who was asleep this week. Someone tried to break in her home. She had 3 kids at home. She warned the guy, look, I got a gun, I will shoot. The suspect kicked the door in anyway, and on the video that we embedded in the story, you can see him wince when she shoots him. And she said afterward, I would have killed him if I had to. That's how it goes, folks. You don't kick in folks' doors. And I'm thrilled that mother and her daughters, or her children, I don't know whether they were sons or daughters or both, but I'm thrilled that her kids are safe and that she's safe. And that's how it's supposed to work, folks. This story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, we have a lot of Jewish Americans who reacted to the synagogue shooting by arming up, buying guns, getting firearm training, just a surge, flocking to firearm training. I can't think of another country where that would be happening, where that would be part of the response. But people want to exercise their right to self-defense, and it's wonderful to see more Americans doing it. And again, because it's singular, in other words, there's not another country where that kind of response would be possible, I just want to point out, this is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, thanks for listening this week with Bullets. Get your friends, your family members, your coworkers to listen. Get them to subscribe to the podcast. You download it free at iTunes. It downloads every Tuesday to your phone. You don't even have to think about it once you subscribe. And after you've listened a while, go back in and give us a review. We need all the 5-star reviews we can get. And until the next time we're together, always remember, more guns equal more freedom.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.